Let me first say that for me, this legislation is very important because there's nothing that has motivated me more throughout my life than working towards justice, fairness, and equity. My personal life story, that of my husband and my children, my elders, my ancestors have fueled this lifelong devotion. I have seen it, I have lived it, I've suffered through it, and I have fought it head on. That is why I ran for public office, because I try so hard to address these issues as a private citizen, as a mother, as an advocate, but quickly realized that I had to be at the decision-making table, and that's what motivated me to run for public office in 2004. After 14 years of a lengthy track record fighting for equity and justice in this county, I have arrived here at the point where legislation is necessary in order to codify this effort. A lot of work has gone into trying to put forth best practices, initiatives, lots and lots of budget decisions. And what we have seen time and time again every year as we examine our data is that many of the disparities, many of the inequities continue to persist, and some actually have gotten worse. And so as I had to reflect really hard on my own personal journey as a public official and understanding that I have never really stopped being an advocate and an activist, I realized that unless we had a structural way to examine the data, unless we were forced to look at every decision that we make through this lens, the discipline wasn't really there. And although all of us want to work towards this goal, the reality is that unless we have structural pieces in place that force us, then we'll never be able to get to the ultimate goal that we all want, which is to see a day in Montgomery County where disparities do not exist anymore, where opportunities are truly available for everybody, where inequities are no longer something that we have to constantly look at. Let me just say also that on a personal level, there have been so many interesting moments, when I would ask, for example, what's the data regarding our children of color when a specific proposal would come forth. And I'll never forget a particular reporter, I think it was the Sentinel, who immediately tweeted, it took Nancy Navarro 5 seconds to ask about, and he used this, and I quote, about the colored children. And that really struck me because it was as if I was being constantly criticized for bringing up and asking the questions about all of our communities, but specifically about communities that we knew continued to lag behind. And I was really tired of it. And I have to say that for me, this is why, after a lot of conversations with folks in other parts of the country where they have already done this, because in Montgomery County, we don't have to invent everything, spending time in King County and Washington State, talking to folks there, et cetera, it just dawned on me that we had to do it this way. And so first, I also want to acknowledge everybody who started in the beginning of this year with our training on racial equity and social justice, and all of this incredible community conversations. We had over 750 residents who participated in our conversations in Silver Spring, Germantown, White Oak, also the youth town hall that MCPS helped put together. And also the community conversation toolkit. We had about 24 community conversations with different organizations that took this on and really gave us extraordinary feedback. So let me also say that this is just the beginning of a structural shift. This is not a short-term fix. This is not a panacea or some magic wand. This will take work, courage, and resolve. But above all, it will take a commitment to work as a community, to find solutions and common ground. Currently, we all know that there's plenty of suspicion, conspiracy theories, mistrust, hate, division, and toxicity making waves, both at a national level and right here in our county, actually right here in front of this building a couple of days ago. I hope that we will always choose not to fall into complacency by really looking at each other. acknowledging our shared humanity and demonstrating to our children and our young people that hope, love, and justice is and must be possible. So this is why we are here. And actually, I also want to acknowledge the former county council who adopted a resolution last year. But, you know, it really does take quite a bit of an extraordinary team to work on this full-heartedly. So let me quickly just say what is in this bill as introduced. Obviously, we are going to have work sessions and we're going to have public hearings and we're going to do everything that we need to do. But this particular bill establishes a racial equity and social justice program for Montgomery County. It establishes an Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice in the executive branch. It removes the Chief Equity Officer position in the Office of the Executive as a non-merit position, because now this bill requires that this position would be the one leading the Racial Equity and Social Justice Office. It requires the executive to adopt through regulation a racial equity and social justice action plan for the county. It requires each department and office to develop a racial equity and social justice action plan. It requires the executive to submit a racial equity and social justice impact statement to the council for each bill and for each management initiative or program in the recommended budget. Budgetary decisions is where the rubber meets the road. And so this bill requires that for every time that we are going to make a budgetary decision, that we have this information in front of us so that we can structurally make sure that we are working towards our goals and not just doing it in an ad hoc fashion. It establishes a Racial Equity and Social Justice Advisory Committee and sets forth the composition and duties of the committee. This is also important because this is another way that we can have the feedback from the community. It requires the planning board to consider racial equity and social justice impact when preparing a master plan. And I have to tell you, they're already on their way doing extraordinary work in this space. So I think that this is going to be really awesome. Land use is also really pivotal when it comes to these issues of racial equity and social justice. It generally amends the law governing racial equity and social justice. I'll also add that although we are, with this bill, resting the implementation, obviously, with the executive branch, the county council will also create a structure so that we can provide oversight of the county's progress in meeting its racial equity and social justice goals. Public hearing will be on the 29th, and then the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee will take it on. And my goal is that we can adopt this bill right before we go on Thanksgiving break. I also want to publicly acknowledge everybody who's worked so hard on this. Bob Drummer, our senior legislative attorney, who's worked very closely with our amazing Dr. Elaine Bonner-Tompkins, who has been working on these issues and leading for many, many years. And so I really appreciate your guidance and your leadership in this. Tiffany Ward in the County Executive's office, she's done an extraordinary job as well as we work collaboratively to get to this point. In my own office, Roland Ikeloa, Berta Cersosimo, Ben Price, Craig Wilson, and Maida Cruz, who have given me extraordinary support and have really helped guide all of us to this moment. So with that, what I will say also in closing is this. This in no way has anything to do with taking something away from somebody and giving it to another. I always say excellence is not a pie. Excellence is something that it's infinite, and prosperity and abundance is something that is absolutely infinite, as long as we work together and as long as we acknowledge each other, as I said earlier. So I am really thrilled to be here today, as I said before. Very, very humble, and I hope that maybe 10 years, 20 years from now, whenever it is, when I take a look back, that we really start to see all those graphs trending in the positive direction, and that we can also see how Montgomery County not only kept its competitive edge, but also would continue to be an extraordinary place to live.